you once again. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for making time and joining us on the second part of a very important conversation being hosted by, of course, who else, NIAPRAS, always bringing you up to date advocacy, guidelines, law changes, all areas of behavioral health and health. NIAPRAS, we try to stay on top of it and bring you updates and opinions and comments from both sides of the fence. And today we are here to discuss the second part of HALT and the just amazing job they have done in the area of changing the law when it comes to solitary confinement. I am here, of course, with my co-facilitator, Dr. Wilcox. Dr. Wilcox, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, Luis. It's good to be able to participate in part two and want to welcome everyone. And we hope everyone has lots of questions and want to make sure that you use the chat to put your questions and we're going to have some really good discussion today related to the HALT. We have Jerome and Jerome Wright and Natasha White. Both of them are going to give us an in-depth understanding of the stories related to their activism and their current activism that's going on with the HALT and the next steps around call to action. And so we're going to have an exciting discussion today. I just want to say this is an exciting time in the country, and particularly in New York with the, this particular bill, being one that's really speaking strong to the criminal justice system, that this is just the beginning, that we are making sure that we're going to humanize the criminal justice system. And so without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started and let everyone introduce themselves. It's on the call today. Marguerite, would you like to start?
Hello, I'm Marguerite Gale. I'm currently the co-president of the NIAPRAS organization, the board, and co-chair for the Cultural Competence Committee. And look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Marguerite. And then we have Harvey.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Harvey Rosenthal, CEO of NIAPRAS. Which you don't know, I guess I'll finish. If you don't know, NIAPRAS is a 40-year-old statewide coalition of people who use and or provide community mental health services. And we have worked for all that time to improve services, social conditions, and public policies for our community by advancing the values of recovery, rehabilitation and rights, criminal justice reform, community inclusion. And I'm delighted this is a strong committee and more real effort in bringing the message out.
Yes, and what does the acronym NIAPRAS stand for?
New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services.
Thank you.
And I'll put the link in the chat there.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to hear a lot more from Harvey in the session as well. Jerome?
Yes, my name is Jerome Wright. I am one of the statewide organizers for the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, which is one of the groups that was the coalition that formed the HALT Solitary Confinement Act and bill that is now the HALT Solitary Confinement Law in the state of New York, and looking to continue to make this implementation, not in the letter, but the spirit of the law, and to make this a national effort.
Ashe. Thank you, Jerome. Sister Natasha.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha White. I'm the community organizer, one of the community organizers for the HALT Solitary Campaign. I'm a formerly incarcerated survivor of solitary confinement and a member of numerous freedom fighting organizations. I am grateful to be able to share space with you this afternoon for part two. I am excited and look forward to answering any questions and educating and getting some education as much as possible.
Thank you, Natasha. And now we have Teresa Hall.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teresa Hall, and I am with NIAPRIS. I serve on the board of directors. I also a member of the Cultural Competence Committee. I am a past chair and co-chair of said committee. I am very much interested in the HALT activities and endeavors that we have going on. Even though I personally have never been in solitary confinement, many of my nephews and other loved ones have. And I'm looking forward to making strides, more strides rather, in this and being a part of this movement. It's very exciting to me, very exciting.
Thank you.
I'm
thank
also
you.
an evangelist in here in Long Island.
Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you, Teresa, for sure. And I just want to say my role here, I serve on the Cultural Competency Committee with NIASPRIS and have been involved in lots of conferences and in supporting the mission of the NIASPRIS organization. And so before we get started formally, Teresa, would you like to, talk about or open a space for us to give acknowledgement of those persons who have passed and died in solitary confinement?
Yes, absolutely. We give recognition to those that have gone on suffering in solitary confinement, whether they died in solitary confinement, physically, mentally, or emotionally, because we also know that some of those that make it out, a part of them dies in there, never to be the same again. So we've offered up a moment of silence. And right now, what I'd like to do is reach out, send up a little prayer, a very short prayer for their loved ones and those that, even though we were outside, in a lot of ways, we were in there with them. So Father God, we thank you, God. We thank you, God, for your loving kindness, your mercy, watching over us as we slept, Father God. We ask that you would just strengthen us for this journey, oh God. Stand us up straighter than ever before, oh God. Put a rod in our back, oh God, that we may be exactly what you would have us to be, to make the difference that needs to be made in this and many other situations regarding solitary confinement in the state of New York and all over the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Teresa, for sure. That certainly sets the spirit for our conversation today. So as we move forward, Luis, do you have anything you'd like to say before we move forward and allow Jerome, to open a space for Jerome and Natasha to share their stories?
Well, thank you, Dr. Wilcox. I just want everyone on the chat box to please let us know who you are. Introduce yourselves. Give us your name, the region you're coming from. What do you do? What agency are you representing? We would love to hear from you. This, as Dr. Wilcox has clearly stated, it's not only a presentation, it's a conversation, and we welcome. We have worked with Jerome and Natasha now a few occasions, and they love nothing more than talking to you and sharing their ideas and thoughts, but also learning from you through your comments, opinions, ideas, questions. So you could put those on the chat box, or you could let Dr. Wilcox know that you want to make a comment by putting a heart up or your thumbs up or raising your hand, any way you want to do it. And Dr. Wilcox then will make space for you to come in and make your point. And, mainly, as you know, Dr. Wilcox, the key discussions today are next steps and reentry. And I look forward to learning from Natasha, and I look forward to learning from Jerome. Back to you, Dr. Wilcox.
Absolutely, and that's the focus of this webinar today. It's on reentry, it's on next steps, a call to action, and also to really have a real in-depth conversation about what that reentry care needs to look like, and how we can make that happen, and how we can stay sustained in this work and continue to impact additional public policy that's going to make the criminal justice system in New York, as well as in the country, humane to serve individuals, families, and communities. So without further ado, if I may, Jerome, Natasha, which one would you would like to go first?
Well, I'm gonna go first only because Look, okay, shirts up. She, the evangelist got her shirt up. That's what I'm talking about,
Right.
right?
I gotta
I
get my
appreciate
shirt.
that. Well, listen, she started it off just perfectly. I was going to, and I am going to continue to center us in what we're doing. You know, we're talking about next steps and reentry, and we having this great discussion, but we also want to remember that today is the 1 year anniversary
That's right.
of the lynching, the murder, the death of our brother George Floyd. And the sad thing is that since that 1 year anniversary, we've also had several deaths in the intervening years, even up to just about yesterday. So although things are starting to change, incrementally they're starting to change. And I just want us to center before we begin our discussion, take a moment of silence, like we just prayed for the those who we lost and their family members, that we take a moment of silence to reflect on the tragic death of George Floyd and all those black and brown bodies since then have been killed, and reflect on, in this case, what we can do to humanize this world, because it is the lack of humanity that allows us to treat each other like fodder, that we could kill each other indiscriminately, unnecessarily, racially motivated, and in all the ways we harm each other. So I just ask, please, for a moment of silence so you can reflect on how you can bring some humanity in the world and be proactive instead of reactive, to be an agent of change instead of being changed by the agents of racism and oppression that this country so lovingly embraces, unfortunately. Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, it's unfortunate that we as a people are so afraid of, discombobulated and uncomfortable with silence, since we keep such a cacophony of noise and sound and overstimulation in our life with phones and TVs and computers and Zooms and everything else that's going on right now. And to unplug for a moment and remember that really this world is made of you and I, and it's really you and I who are responsible for how this thing turns out, and that this thing can change as we see fit if we're more conscientious about the humanity, the inherent humanity in each and one of us, and not about our race, our religion, sexual preference, orientation, identification, all those things that, as every time we get away from defining us as human and start putting conjugations on black or white, rich or poor, gay or straight, we start to separate, and divide and conquer has always been the game and the winning strategy of the enemy. And in this time and space, we need to embrace a strategy of unity and inclusion and of humanity and helping each other. So we want to start that off with our thing. So our next steps is to take this step towards humanity in the HALT Solitary Confinement Act, that's law, and one, get it implemented in not just the letter of the law, which they're good at doing, following the letter, but not the spirit of the law. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you've heard me and Natasha's story about how traumatic solitary is, how torturous it is, how much of a lasting impact it leaves on the lives of the individuals who suffer it and the family members who suffer with them and the communities that bring them back in. And so we want to make this a thing where this law is done to end solitary. Although we got it down to 15 days, we actually are abolitionists. And we believe that we can abolish the practice of caging people indiscriminately for weeks, months, years, and decades, because nobody should be treated like that. If in this technologically advanced and medicinally advanced time in our lives, we can't find a way to treat people rather than to traumatize them, then we got problems. and I see they come to cut the grass, so I'm gonna have to close this window. Natasha, you want to start off? So see if I can knock some of this noise down. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I want to say also, just kind of summarize a little bit what Jerome has just opened this webinar with, is a call to action around what a lot of folks are saying, particularly out of the Public Policy Institute, is transformative solidarity. You know, that's been sticking with me. And I think Jerome really asserted that as we transform, we need to be in solidarity across all cultural differences and all human differences, that this is a humanitarian effort, and that we want to make sure that we all are in this together so that we can build well civil communities. So Natasha, I'm gonna transfer this over to you.
Okay. Thank you. And so I want to start off with saying that the best way to accomplish the goal that we sure know that us on this call want, which is that people deal in solidarity, is everybody needs to want for their sister what they want for themselves. You know, when people truly begin to admit that not giving humanity or being humane to another person is wrong, then there'll be some progress. The insanity is, even with the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's death, we still see that the killings are still going on. It's the same way we feel about the fear of the HALT bill. I started out in advocacy work on the Close Rikers campaign. I was part of the bail reform. We seen that get turned back around. So right now with next steps, we're just basically fighting for implementation. Now this may be a little harder for them to come for because it has been made a law. But the fact that people would want to go back on it shows us that the ignorance is, as much as we've talked, as much as we've rallied, as much as we shared ourselves, and common knowledge and just human decency, that people have still not learned. Um, you know, it takes a lot from us.
You know, one of the things I want to ask you, Latasha, you know, there's some people that are on the call that was a part of part one,
Yeah.
but there's some new people on the call. So could you give a summary of what the HALT build is and what it stands for, and a little bit about how it got passed, the activism that helped to do that?
The whole pardon me, the whole solitary confinement bill basically restricts and limits the amount of time a person can be in solitary confinement from, you know, there's people that have been in solitary for 30, 27, 40, even 40 years. It eliminates that time to a 15-day period, where after that 15th day they would have to go into a rehabilitative setting, something that addresses the underlying issues. It also prevents people with mental illness, pregnant women, elderly people, people with underlying illnesses, and adolescents from being put in solitary confinement. The fact of the matter is, prison is a traumatizing experience, and most people that go to prison coming from a traumatizing experience. Anything that you had to do to get arrested couldn't have been any fun. You know, we got the solitary confinement bill passed through many, many years of diligence, dedication, sacrifice, whether it was calling legislation all day long, about 100 people at a time, calling the same person's office, to sleeping in front of Governor Cuomo's office in the winter time, or going up to Albany, blocking off the $1 Million Staircase, wearing tombstones, marching, protesting, webinars, op-eds, constant meetings, advocacy days, traveling from one part of New York to the next, unlimited Zoom. I mean, it was a lot, and I just got here. So for the people that were on board 7 years ahead of me, you know, this is what your life becomes. As an advocate and a community organizer, this is a 24-hour job. 24 hours. I've slept in a chair outside and sat next to a person that I wake up at 3 a.m. and he's still in his email. You know what I mean? We had to come together as a people affected dramatically to educate people who think this issue don't affect them. And with every moment and every sacrifice is really huge to consistently relive your own traumas. For Jerome, when going into a built-in cell and having to listen to the noises that you are recorded from solitary confinement, that has got to be something that he must repair himself from once he gets home, his wife, his children, for days. That's how long it takes to regroup, you know. So that's how solitary was passed. We weren't letting up. We weren't letting up, and we're going to continue not to let up, because passed and implemented is two different things. So this is just you know how you when you get a house built, the foundation is built, the house ain't even picked out yet. So now we're going shopping.
I
Thank
guess I'll
you.
jump in from there, because she don't take too many pauses. So if she took a pause, that means jump in, because she get it going. No,
Yeah.
Natasha, I will add this, that in addition to getting HALT implemented, we recognize that there's a larger struggle for criminal justice reform in the state of New York. And the fact that HALT is passed, as humongous as that is, there are other bills like these parole bills, like elder parole, fan time parole, less is more, like the court fees. And I mean, they got us in such a bad situation in this country legally that we need to undo years and generations of racially motivated, discriminatory legal practices and abuses. And so while we're simultaneously fighting this lawsuit that's been filed by the corrections officers, the Police Benevolent Association, we're also enjoined with other campaigns who helped us, like NIAPRIS helped us to get HALT passed. So we're now on Zoom for RAP and Citizens Action and Vocal and, and other groups who now have bills like, that are all intertwined. Because listen, that in mass incarceration, I'm talking to clinicians and professionals, right? I want to talk about, when we talk about next steps here, we talk about replicating what worked this time with the understanding that may not work this next time. All those lawyers who have these $1 million judgments say past results don't guarantee future earnings. So they telling you, really, if you hire me, you could lose, because just because I got $1 million for them don't mean I'm gonna get $1 million for you. And that's the risk you take. And the risk we're taking now is that because we got this passed, we still got a whole slate of bills, like a justice roadmap, actually, that we have to get passed in order for us to say that some real justice, some real change has come to the criminal justice system here in New York State. Because for far too long, it has been a discriminatory, based on Black and brown bodies being fodder for a system that provides economies and livelihoods for rural upstate communities, that provide economies for poor white people, and that now recently has provided economies for poor Black people to get in and oppress other Black people. So it is systemic. That's why this whole racism thing is so insidious, that it now doesn't matter who's at the head, whether it's a Black face, a white face, Asian face, or Hispanic face, or Pacific Islander face. If they're in a system that's fraught with racism, they're going to replicate what the system produces. And that's why we got to break these systems. The criminal justice system in the state is not broken. It is working the way they set it up to work. And that's what we got to do. We got to break it. The first break in that was breaking that paradigm of punishment and torture is HALT. The next thing is eviscerating this parole system that does nothing but lock people back up or keep them in there. We got our elders becoming our ancestors in prison. People who could be out here. We talk about the crime out here with young people with guns and all that. You know why? Because we don't have these elders out here to help to teach them. That ain't what you should be doing. I did that already. It got me 30 years. And let me tell you what I did learn in the 30 years that you should be doing. And they're going to respect it coming from them brothers, because them brothers done put in the time. They got the street credibility. They done been the idiots and the dummies that they need to be. And now they come in as men with agendas of positivity and community unification. They don't want that to happen. That's why it seems so conspiratorial. When you know that letting somebody out of prison at 55 years old, who's done 30 years, is best for you than keeping them in there while they're a drain on the economy, because you go from $60,000 a year to house somebody to somebody 55 and over, $240,000 a year. Black and brown people, they age terribly in those. First of all, people are not used to being caged. So just the trauma of being in a cage 10, 15, 20, 30 years is enough to break your body down. Personally, I did 30 years in prison. A crime I did commit, regrettably, but I got 2 false fake hips, titanium hips, because laying on those iron beds in inactivity for 30 years robbed my body of its natural minerals and vibrancy, so I had to get my hips replaced. Now, be that as it may, I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad to be out here, and I'm glad to be doing the work I'm doing. But we got so many brothers who, if you have any respect for me and Natasha and what we do and how we represent ourselves, they mentored us, they taught us. These are the people we need out here. That's the next fight. Get our ancestors out get our elders out before they become our ancestors, so we can stabilize our communities. These are men and women coming home who now know what it's like to be a man and a woman. And they know what it's like to be a Black man or a Black woman or a Hispanic man in this day and time. To community-oriented, mentors, teachers. You know, this is what the next step is, to get them out of them prisons and into our communities and welcome them in and give them the resources they need to do what they're doing in there, keeping them from killing each other in there. They're keeping them from turning that whole thing upside down. That's what they use us for in there. I was running, they called me now out here, they ain't gonna give me a driver's license, and then I had an institutional pass. I can go anywhere in the jail I wanted to. You know why? Because I was a force for them to do their job, to tell my brothers, listen, we don't need this gang stuff. Tell my brothers, man, put them drugs down, man. We got a war going on our people, genocide. You over here getting high, we dying. Stop this not getting the education, because without an education, we can't grow, because we got to teach the babies. I don't care what you think about what this country is about. We still got to be, those are things that we doing in there that would be serving us out here. They could be working in these community centers, in these social agencies, bringing these brothers in who want to listen to them, who feeding for a father figure, a positive male role model, somebody they respect, because they ain't going there and snitch and turn into something they ain't supposed to be, but became the man God destined them to be, the men and women that's ready to stand up. But they don't
Come
want to.
on.
Now I'm preaching. It ain't even Sunday, and I'm sorry.
Amen, amen. I'm over here saying amen.
Yeah, Jerome,
Listen.
absolutely. You know, your mantra, I mean, your wisdom around, you know, and I made a note of it. You know, we need to get our elders out so that they don't become our ancestors. You know, that is so powerful to talk about how we're connected, you know, and how the trauma of solitary confinement and other atrocities within the criminal justice system is connected to impacting not only the individuals directly impacted, but the family and the community. and all of the community, whether you realize it or not, that we need to make sure that young people are able to get the wisdom of the ancestors and of the elders, and they can't do that if they're locked away, just like we lock away our elderly from our youth, and that's what's going to help us move forward to a well civil society, multi-ethnic, well civil society. And I hear that strong coming from you. And thank you for sharing, how you've been impacted physically and the trauma that you've had and continue to navigate through in your own life as you're involved in this activism. Natasha, would you like to add more to that in terms of your story and how you've been impacted by this inhumane criminal justice system?
Yeah, sure. That's what I'm here for. No problem. Thank you. So I was in solitary confinement, but my story and my drive to end solitary comes actually from my spouse being in solitary confinement. Well, ex-spouse. 12 years worth of solitary confinement from the age of 17. Put a serious disconnect in him emotionally, which ended up turning my house into a war zone. Minor things. The train ain't on time. I can't find my phone. The door won't unlock. Anything like change of plans was just something he really could not deal with. He was very angry and extremely smart. Half of the time, the saddest part of it is half of the time we would be talking and say we're texting back and forth, and I would be Googling what he's talking about because I don't even understand the words he's saying, and I'm a college graduate, So for a very intelligent man who read over 2,000 books while incarcerated, solitary confinement took away his emotional connection. And he came home and hit the ground running. So a lot of the signs didn't seem that serious to me. I thought it was just usual frustration from a man that's been in prison almost 26 years. However, he had ended up in I'm so sorry, but my clients keep calling and I'm trying to stop it. 1 second. Because it calls on my laptop. Jesus. Can y'all hear that ringing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have to disconnect this. Sir, you have to stop calling. Let me oh Jesus.
Do you need a minute to take care of that?
No, I can't turn it off for some reason. Okay, I'm good. So
Okay.
What was I saying? Oh, okay. So, he had hit the ground running. He came out with a lot of connections. As Jerome said, we watch our elders become ancestors. Those are the people that teach us. So we built families in there. It'd be a whole family. You have a mom, a dad, well, in the women's prison anyway, a mom, a dad, sisters, brothers. And I'm pretty sure the men bond as brothers and will have one elder that's their pops and they all eat together and so he had came home with a lot of connections, one of them being on the board of directors at Fortune Society, and unfortunately things went bad really, really quick, to the point where I ended up having to relocate. He was in an accident at work and it caused him to end up in a wheelchair for about 2 months. And you take a man that's been in prison 26 years, 12 years in solitary confinement. He's an workout fanatic, lifter, everything. And now you put him in a wheelchair and send him home with me. You can only imagine the
I can
trauma that went on in my house, to the point where I went to Albany with Just Leadership as part of the Close Rikers campaign and met HALT and never went back home. Solitary confinement, can ruins people's lives, breaks spirits, shuts down mental growth, deteriorates the brain, the body, and the soul. Like it is a no-brainer that means torture. It's a no-brainer, and anybody that condones solitary confinement is evil, and it needs to be dealt with one way or another. It's not something you can say, oh, maybe it's not that bad in here. You go sit in the cell for 23 hours, 24 hours, get talked to like trash, not be able to communicate with anybody, might eat, might not, might be able to clean yourself, might not be able to clean yourself for years and years and years. And we'll see how easy your transition comes if you make it home. If you make it home. I used to get scared because my husband would be staring off and I would say, what are you doing? And he would say, I'm playing chess. And it never dawned on me until, I basically had to run away from home, that he had some severe issues when it came to not being able to deal with somebody else. So, it taught him how to be alone. And even alone, he's pulling his hair out. So, I'm grateful for the fight we had. I'm a little angry that we still have to keep going, because the humanity that's shown by these people who believe in solitary confinement is non-existent. It's non-existent, and it hurts severely.
Natasha, I want to jump into something she just said about him playing chess in his head, and how somebody on here, even clinicians on here and everything, you might think, well, and she said, well, he was messed up. You know what that was? I do that. I can do that. That's sitting in a solitary confinement cell with a guy 6 cells away from you, and you have a board that you both constructed out of the back of a piece of cardboard, where you drew the blocks. I know 64 squares this way and all that, 8 that way. And then you take pieces and you tear them up and you put notations on, like a king and queen, and there's pork and pork, and you put that down, and you're moving on the board in your cell while they're moving on the board in their cell. And you're yelling out, king, rook, pawn to knight 3. And in your head, you're playing it out like what he's going to do in his move coming back, because you can't physically sit in front of him like normal people do and play a chess game. But in order to have some sanity, to use your mind constructively, you will yell out from in the middle of the night. You'll be playing 4 a.m. King, rook, to knight 3. Checkmate, mate you, yeah. But he's playing in his head, because this is a way you've learned to cope. I have problems with intimacy myself, that when you learn to find solace in yourself, it is hard to find solace with other people, because they always disappoint you in some way or form or shape. And the way you've been able to handle not being disappointed is by being in yourself. So that becomes your new normal. That becomes your comfort zone. That when people try to shake you out of it, your loved ones, people who really want to show you love, there's that emotional disconnect right there, because you've had to fend for yourself and be emotionally secure, and the only way you knew how was this way. And turning that off now is not just an option. You don't just turn it off and say, well, I'm out here, I got my wife, my family, my kids, I can't be left with the grandkids overnight, not because of any crime, but because when I fall asleep, because of the noise I heard in solitary 24/7, I found a way I could turn that off. So I turn off everything. So the kids could be up tearing the house up. I wouldn't hear them. So they don't let me at when it's, I can't be around when it's daytime to go to bed. When they go to sleep, then I got them. I can, when they sleep, I can sleep. But if because I go sleeping for them, the house will not be standing when people wake and come back. So, and that's because I still haven't learned how to wake up my spider senses that, people jump when they hear stuff. Me, in order to find rest, I had to find a way to turn that off. Else I'd have been up all the time. And now turning that on again is difficult. So, I mean, it just, and I don't want to get bogged down with that. I know we want to talk about quite a few things. And reentry, I don't want to walk away from this because I know one of the things we wanted to highlight and the next steps, we're going to get Harvey and Lewis some information about our events because we got one Saturday in Rochester. So people in the Rochester area can come out. We're doing a thing for the parole justice in New York City on June 5th. We're doing something in the Bronx and Westchester County on parole justice. On the 7th, we're doing memorializing June 7th, that Monday in the city. We're memorializing Layleen Polanco and Khalif Browder, who both died on June 7th in their respective years because of solitary, him by suicide, even free, and Layleen in a cell, and Rikers Island in solitary. The only beautiful thing about that day is it does happen to be my birthday, so I'm going to go down and memorialize the dead while we celebrate the living and the fight that us living have to fight so that there won't be more Layleens and Khalifs all over this country. So there's a lot of things coming up with the Justice Roadmap we've got. And today they're doing right now, when I get off here, I'm jumping on the Zoom to end qualified immunity, which is one of the laws that allow law enforcement to get away with killing and harming our people with total impunity. That has to stop. You can't legislate behavior, but you can legislate consequences to people's behavior, and that's usually when they change, when there's a consequence. So there's so many things going on, but reentry is about the continuum of care, and we talked about this a little earlier.
Jerome, 1 minute. I just want to say to you, you've given everybody on this webinar lots of activities and activism that is getting ready to occur. And so if you can you put some of those activities in the chat, and so people can make sure they get them on their calendar. And this is part of the call to action. If you would put those activities in the chat. And I also want to say at this point in the webinar, as Natasha and Jerome has shared with us their stories, this is sacred information. This is their personal lived experience. This is not an academic exercise, people. This is life. They have shared something very sacred with all of us on this webinar. And we need to have high regard and respect for them to be able to share this traumatic lived experience that they have experienced as human beings and the impact it's had on their intimate life, their family life, and so, we really need to soak this in, that this is an example of what is happening to people all over this country. This is not something we need to take as passé, just FYI. This is what's happening, the humane, torturous experience of people in the United States in our criminal justice system. And a lot of you on here, I'm looking at the chat, are from various organizations in the criminal justice systems inside the walls, as well as mental health and advocacy organizations. We want to hear your voice. And I just want to say that the lived experience is what brings us to a grounded feeling understanding of how inhumane this system is. It's not a bureaucratic exercise here. So I think at this point, Harvey, would you like to speak about NIASPRA's role in this advocacy around the HALT bill and other criminal justice activities that need to be transformed and changed?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wilcox. I can't avoid being moved by every one of you. You know, I'm Tasha and Jerome know I love them. We've been together on this front. But I'm so proud of our committee for sponsoring this and the way it's going on. And that I cannot listen to Jerome and Natasha without wanting to cry, without feeling enraged, sometimes laughing, and respect and commitment to go forward. And that's, I guess, what I'll talk about a little bit here. So, you know, Jerome or Natasha, in terms of the lawsuit, I don't know what NIAPRIS can do, but to Dr. Wilcox's point, anything you can send to me that I can then send to our fairly large list, we'd be happy to come out like we have before and do that. One of the things is I'm on the Justice Center, which is the state's oversight body for abuse to people with special needs. And that group oversees the enforcement of what was once called the shoe exclusion law and the HALT bill. So a year from now, we'll be reviewing. I'm already talking with them now about getting ahead of making sure we're reviewing the HALT bill enforcement on a regular basis. A big thing for NIAPRIS is what I call the intersectionality of criminal justice, crime, and race. So that translates into a lot of areas, but the way of the context for me is diversion, rehabilitation, and reentry. So diversion to me means, you know, alternative first responders. So there's money in the budget, and there's a lot of interest around who do we send out when people are in trouble, and how can we not send out the police? How can we send out a peer? And an emergency medical technician. Maybe Daniel Prude would be alive today had he gotten that instead of a policeman sort of coming out. So we're focusing on that. We're focusing on these crisis stabilization centers and respite program, all these alternatives to inpatient and arrest and incarceration. So on the front end, we want to keep people out of the criminal justice system. While they're in the system, as you know, we've been working very hard on HALT, and we'll do anything that we're asked to do by CAIC and their allies. In terms of reentry, I may have mentioned this before, but New York State has a waiver application in to the federal government to restart Medicaid 30 days before discharge. And that means people could leave jail or prison with a worker and with health care. So that's critical. And right now that has to do with the Medicaid. That's Medicaid. So it's being looked at in federal statute, but more likely a federal waiver from New York. And for any of that to work, there'll have to be, you know, the presence of peers, people with lived experience, people of color with lived experience at every level, whether it's diversion or reentry or any of the above. I want to put something in my last comment is we have been watching and talking directly with and supporting President Biden's nominee to be the new head of SAMHSA, Dr. Miriam Delphin-Rittmont. This is an email I composed that shows her great interest in cultural competence and fighting racism and racial equity and working for racial equity. So take a look there. And while you're looking at that, I'm also going to put in the NIAPRIS news sign up, because you'll be getting all these things on CAIC, on HALT, on the oversight, on reentry, and on the on Dr. Rittman, so Delphin. So I would just say that we're really the simple formula for us here: keep people out of contact with the criminal justice system. If they get confined, and work with things that HALT has inspired us, and then help people leave and stay out of the criminal justice system. That's our real focus. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. Awesome. You know, one of the things, you know, in mental health and in criminal justice initiatives, we have a lot of acronyms, you know, and so we have to make sure that when we speak in acronyms, that we actually say what they stand for, so that we have clarity as we move forward. But there's a question in the chat that says, talk a little bit more about the justice roadmap. Jerome or Natasha, would you like to address that question?
Sure. I think I did put in there that you could go to the Justice Roadmap website, justiceroadmap.org. It is Justice Roadmap is a is a formula that was put together by the community, the Center for Community Alternatives, and it includes several bills, of which HALT and the marijuana taxation law, walking while trans, and the excluded workers fund were all part of those. There were 4 bills that are now laws that were part of the Justice Roadmap. Justice Roadmap is about criminal justice reform, social justice reform, and immigrant justice reform. So they have bills on there to protect immigrants from ICE, and they got things on there to protect normal people from predatory fees, court fees, and fines. And they have things on there about criminal justice, like the parole bills that we were just talking about, that we're having some access to. So there are a bunch of different things that you can get involved in, but they all revolve around this whole process of ending mass incarceration and providing some equity for Black, brown, immigrant people who in this country, and definitely in New York State, have suffered greatly. You know, we were helpful in getting that $2 billion in excluded fund money for workers who were not documented, who got none of that stimulus money. They're instrumental in helping get, people who talk about this marijuana tax law, they don't know that the bill that the governor wanted was 180 degrees, 360 degrees different than the bill that we got. And that's because the legislators in the community fought that the corporations couldn't take it over, and that all the revenue being generated by that, 40% of that has to go back by law to the communities that have been decimated. The governor wanted that money to go into the general fund, but they could use it to do whatever they wanted to, and they held fast on that and got everything they wanted. Even the walking while trans ban, people laugh at something like that. Well, sex workers, you don't even understand. And I know, thank God, none of you have had to live that experience, and neither have I, but I've worked with them. And when you hear somebody talk about being transgender, and because they're transgender, not being able to get a job because they're being discriminated against, I don't care how proficient they are at what they do, once they find out and have to disclose that they have transgender, that they're discriminated against. And then the only way they could feed themselves or find a way to gain money is to resort to some type of sex work. That is atrocious, man, that we do that to people. It's just like black and white water fountains almost. They can't drink, they can't get employed like everybody else just because they're different. Now, I don't care what your personal proclivities is or your personal like or dislike of that. It's a human being that's their identity. Respect that. And if they can do, you're hiring people that can't even do their job. But you won't hire somebody that can, because they have a gender identity that doesn't conform to your whatever it is. Now, whether you support it or not. And I'm really getting sick and tired, and I know I'm soapboxing here for one moment. I'm sick and tired of people that look like me, who've been discriminated against all their life, being complicit in the discrimination of anybody else. Because if it's wrong for us, then it's wrong for everybody else.
Absolutely, Ashe. Coming through the
Can I ask quick, Dr. Wilcox?
Go ahead, Natasha.
And the greatest thing about the Justice Roadmap, when you look at a roadmap takes you from place to place. So we are going to fight, violation after violation of human rights from state to state. Like, this is the beginning. This is the very beginning of what we can do and what we will do. I just want to clarify that.
Ashe, and I think we have a question coming in from Luis.
Thank you. A phenomenal conversation and excellent insight from everyone of the panelists. I wanted to ask, because you have brought up a couple of times the governor's office, and we all know right now that the governor is very preoccupied with certain things that are happening around him. But I wanted to know, Jerome, Natasha, Harvey, in your opinion and from your conversations, if not with him directly, people from his office, how supportive is he of these changes? And can he do anything before he leaves, even if he leaves early? Can he do anything before he leaves with the power of his hand by signing documents and saying, go ahead? What are your thoughts about the governor's office and this project?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Jerome and Natasha may know more, but I don't think the HALT bill would have passed if he was in a stronger position. So I think that's already important. He usually is able to, to roll over the legislature like he did a year or so ago. So I don't think we'd have the HALT bill if the governor had been in a stronger position. He might not have taken on the unions, in a sense, by signing the bill. So I would say that. In terms of subsequent actions, what's coming up, it's too early for me to know. I haven't heard anything about it. So that's what I know.
Yeah, I believe he needed an ally. He needed to, he's at first of all, he would want people to be treated fairly while being incarcerated, because it looked like he might end up incarcerated. Number one. If he was smart, he'd roll with Rush, because baby, you got to be right next to Bill. You want to make sure, he probably want to make sure he's treated fairly. That's all I got to say about him.
Well, that's certainly indicative that we're all in this together. That's a good example, Natasha, for sure. But I want to kind of pivot this conversation to something that's, Jerome, did you want to
I just wanted to say one thing about the governor, for what I know. First of all, Harvey is what we believe 100% that Harvey's correct. That had he not been embroiled in all his personal shenanigans, that he would have fought us tooth and nail like he has every year. I don't want people to forget, and everybody right now coming to his aid and all of this, I don't want us to forget it's the same governor who rolled with the Republicans when they were running roughshod over the Democrats in the state legislature and caucused with them and did all that. So he's really no friend of ours and no ally. He definitely needed to do some of the things he's doing now, but I think that is divine intervention there, because who would think a year ago when he was next to being the president, when everybody had him in such high regard as the governor who saved America from the pandemic, when we had the crazy guy in the White House, and to a year later be this big in everybody's eyes because of all the other stuff, that only God can do something like that. And don't be for that, we don't get that passed. Or the other things, the marijuana thing, he would have never caved on giving that money back to the communities if he would have thought that, man, this is the same community that right now holding me down, that don't make me resign. See what I'm saying? So he got he owe a lot of debt to the Black community in particular, but to half of the people in the state of New York that he can't ruffle their feathers like he been bullying them because he's not in a position of power. So yeah, that's it. And who knows who we get next?
Well, I think you have summed it up, Jerome, quite nicely about how messy politics is. And we don't know what to expect from the mess, So I want to pivot this conversation to something that's real critically important. Teresa, we definitely want to get your voice in on this as well, is to talk about, as we know, as Jerome and Natasha has pointed out, how impactful trauma of the solitary confinement and other aspects of this criminal justice system is on persons, their families, and community. And trauma, as we all know, lives in the body. It lives in the mind, and it gets triggered. And it's something that's an ongoing process of recovery and wellness, and it's a working through process. So we want to talk about the needed self-care that is necessary for persons who have been abused by the criminal justice system, particularly looking at solitary confinement and other kinds of inhumane atrocities that occur. What kinds of self-care that needs to occur within the prison system, within the walls, and what kind of self-care is necessary to support people to be able to gain wellness and to be able to flourish in their lives moving forward after they've been released. Let's talk about some of those areas, as many of those areas we can with the time we have left, and where the gaps are, what needs to occur that's not occurring.
Okay, so thank you, Deborah, for that. First thing, let me say, Jerome, you said so many poignant things. One thing you said is about when you spoke about the elders, right? So when we know the old adage, the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone and the thigh bone is connected. So when you remove a section, if you will, of our people, of our way, so when you just extract them, I'm not even talking about where you put them yet. The fact that you've removed them with through your penal system, through your man laws, through your caging way of handling things, you've disjointed a generation. You've disjointed a culture. You know what I mean? When in those places, nothing that sustains us culturally can be found. You know, you can't, there's no connection with your family to support you mentally or emotionally. You're cut off or extracted, if you will, from the human race almost, when you're put into um, punishments like solitary confinement and a lot of the systems and services as well, right? So when we talk about as a people, what sustains us, you know, if part of it will be going back to the basics, you know, there isn't a pill for everything, you know, and just like your experience would never be found on page 300 and anything of any textbook anywhere, nor will the answer, nor will the answers that we seek. And so I applaud the work that you're doing, and I look forward to us getting back to some of the basics. You would wonder how you would implement it or make it possible, but love is a very important thing. And you just can't walk up and tell people you love them. You have to get them back to the basics of spirituality, people connecting with people, you know, open the systemic racism that goes from way high up in places that we don't even see or think about, but we're experiencing the deficits of the mindsets, of the laws that's being created, of these cookie cutter services. So I look forward to us being able to bring spirituality into it and the things that we know, because like I said, there isn't a pill for everything, but if there's somewhere I can go or and talk about I'm jumping the gun here, but Dr. Wilcox, the circle, for example, if we created more services and areas where we can truly be ourselves, because we're gonna have to heal. We have to heal some of the things that how we wind up, like Natasha said, in the penal system. Getting there wasn't no joyride, you know. The person that winds up in those situations, myself included, is usually from hurt or trauma, you know, or some experience that we went through that took a big chunk of who we are away from us, you know. So it's going to be a difficult task, but one of the things we have to look at is going to be getting back to that thing that they've taken away from us, and that's being able to be human to human, to help heal each other, to hear each other, to understand each other, because that's where the answers are going to be found. It's going to be found in our voices. So we're going to have to continue to create these arenas, such as Natasha and Jerome are doing, and Niapris, and each of us in our own way. You know, my path is spirituality and God, you know, and you wouldn't be shocked because you grew up with it. We all grew up with it, whether it was Muslim or Catholic or what have you. You would be shocked or not shocked at how many people services like that or acquainted with that can help heal. You know, trauma, like I said, there is no pill for that. So we got to look more into services that look inside, allow us to look inside, allow what's inside to come outside safely. Amen. And be able to hear each other and find our answers among our experiences.
Thank you,
And then we
Teresa.
have the war cry of HALT, you know, and those are the things that say, hey, look at us. We've had enough, you know, no more. You know, the camping outside the state offices and so forth and so on. But once we get their ear, you know, we have to make sure when we're pouring in that we're pouring out.
Thank you,
I
Teresa.
just
Thank
wanted
you.
to say real quickly before I sign off.
Sure.
First, I want to say thank you, everyone who attended, and thank you for the invite. It is always a pleasure to share space with all of you. Um, everyone needs to stand firm on legislation. When it comes to reentry, the biggest issue about reentry is housing. Okay, besides this, I'm a housing specialist for a virtual clinic, and the lack of housing for people that have housing assistance that pays 5 years in advance is treacherous. Imagine how it is for somebody coming home from prison with $40 in their pocket and going into a shelter. So when the contractors say they're building affordable housing, we have to make sure they're building affordable housing for the people that can't afford housing, not for people that make $70,000 a year. With that said, I relinquish my square. I love you guys. I just relocated and I have to go to the rent office.
Well, Natasha, we
Can
want
we just
to,
add, Deborah, can I add
so I
something
want to
quickly to what
say,
she
yes, but hold 1 second. I want to just
Okay.
wish Natasha farewell because she's leaving the webinar. So we want to thank you. Thank you for what you have contributed to this dialogue.
Hey, look at Harvey.
Okay, and so thank you again, and as we continue to fight on. So thank you for your contribution today.
Love you all. Thank you as well.
Peace and
Jerome, I'll
blessing.
see you later.
Okay, and Teresa,
Yeah, I
bring you
just
in,
quickly
and then
wanted to
Marguerite.
piggyback on what
I
she
think
said
Marguerite,
very quickly.
is trying to talk.
Yeah, housing
Okay.
is important, but we also have to understand that we have to teach people how to live, how to maintain their housing, because a lot of us get that housing and we bring a lot of our, you know, incompleteness with us. So we want to not only provide a roof over a person's head, but teach them how to have a quality, you know, help us understand how to have a quality of life and maintain home.
Absolutely, no question about that. Thank you, Teresa. Now we're getting into some real issues around what the critical needs are and how they need to be addressed. Marguerite?
Okay, so one of the things that struck me, a few things that were said, to me speaks to the role that peers have had and historically in the mental health system, helping people move out of an institution and into the community. It seems to me that we should be trying to direct monies to be able to create, to further fund the peer work that's being done. So in mental health, there is this community of people with forensic, what we call forensic backgrounds. And they're coming with lived experience coming out of institutional settings, and they want to give back. So that might be a way to translate and respond to the need that is there, because it's not enough. The issue of recidivism is talking about the fact that people do not have all the proper supports and resources. The other thought that I had, and this is policy-wise, is that we are talking about trying to make sure that Medicaid is instituted 30 days before, but it seems to me that if you put 30 days out there, that's good, because we know in mental health people were having trouble just being able to keep their wellness because they were not in the position to access the medical care they need. We may want to think about it being more than 30 days and also to have things going on that may very much resemble what HALT is doing, what HALT is doing within the institution in terms of creating rehabilitative type supports for folks. So that I don't see why, since we are so active with Zoom now, why if you have 30 days, additional 30 days, 60 days, that a person couldn't get connected with informed, trauma-informed supports before their discharge. So if that's, again, the forensic peers, if that is, I mean, since the system is now trying to move in the direction of addiction and mental health supports together, you know, that maybe we're tapping into the services that also are being delivered to people coming from the addiction community. But it would be powerful for people to have those relationships in process before they exit the institution. And I would think it would be incredibly motivating and very, you know, empowering and important. You know, your feeling of comfort that you're going somewhere and that you know where you're going, and that there are people there looking for you and in a position to add some support. So, you know, I know that there is a roadmap, and I think that, you know, that COVID has created a lot of resources. Maybe there is a way that wellness is enriched, like our agenda of better health is enriched by allowing people the opportunity to have more to address their trauma needs, because there's no one, I mean, walking while Black will create enough trauma for you. You don't have to go into an institution to have issues with harsh life experiences. But coming out of the prison to be able to have in place things that are addressing things that historically have just not been talked about, you know, that are needs. You know, I think that that's important.
Critically
Marguerite, I
important.
just want to say that the federal monies you were talking about, I put in the chat box, the feds are saying explicitly that states should use hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to states for peer services and for reentry, among the other things in that letter. And OMH is responding, saying they want to do that.
Oh, great. I think I need-
Absolutely. I'm looking in the chat, and people are saying things like, you know, people need services set up before being released. They're saying it is, of course, impossible to find housing, and they're not being able to leave. Let's see, complain about housing. Nearly impossible to find men who have finished their time, not being able to leave the prisons due to, you know, not being able to have housing while on parole. This is some of the chats. So I want to get Jerome's voices in here. Jerome, from your lived experience and your knowledge around your activism, what are the biggest gaps in terms of care that's needed for people who are inside and people who are re-entering?
I mean, I think you said it right there. We know we talked about continuum and continuity of care. That's the biggest missing piece, that they give you $40 and they kick you out, or a bus ticket, or somebody picks you up and you're going, and then they ship you off to parole, which is another entity that's really vested with not making sure that you succeed in the most optimal way. So what's needed? Housing, definitely. I said somebody talk about compliant housing to be able to, you know, you have guys who stay in jail. We had a guy just die because he had parole, but they took so long, you know, getting all their ducks in a row to get him out of there, he ended up passing away before he got home. So having a transitional plan, you know, when we talk about reentry, and I said this in an earlier Zoom, reentry got to be something that you talk about when they come in the front door, not when they're going out the back door. Because if you're not setting up benchmarks and milestones for people to hit, and networks for them to be involved in, and community agencies and groups for them to go out into that's going to accept them and welcome them and help them, and they have them. They just don't want to make the connection, because the connection means you're going to succeed and not recidivate more often than not, and the system cannot operate if you don't come back, because they can't do nothing with a prison cell but put somebody incarcerated in there. You can't change that into a hotel, motel. You can't get any value out of it unless you're putting a butt in that cell. And that's what they got to do. They got to keep some butts in themselves. So what we really need is agencies that when you coming in saying, what do you want to do? What now that you're in this court, in this situation, you got this amount of time before you got an opportunity to get out of the situation. What are you going to do while you're here to prepare for what you do when you get out of it? Now, I had the benefit of having a family who prodded me, who cajoled me, and who assisted me. But 90% of my peers did not have that. So there got to be communities. You know, we talk about our people and loving them and how to treat it wrong. They are by society and everybody else. And then we do the same thing. We don't provide opportunities when they come home for them to succeed. We don't welcome Pookie and Ray Ray back home, you know, and help them get set up, you know, or we help them for the first 2 weeks and then we start looking at them like, yo, you know, everybody got to do something around here. When you can't get a job and you ain't never been arrested, what you mean Pookie and Ray Ray gonna get a job before you? A good job. Or where they got issues like substance abuse, anger management, all these programs they got to take so that they can't work. So now you're causing a dysfunction in the home. I'm a grown man with kids and family, and I can't get a job because I got to take these courses during working hours. Because if I don't, then they put me back in jail. Now, how's that helping me succeed? Because now, as a man, I'm going to want to take care of my family. So either I'm not going to go there and get violated, or I'm gonna go there and do the ones and twos after that to make sure I got enough money to make sure my family eat, which puts me at jeopardy for going back. So you're trying to put me back in prison instead of providing me. First of all, can nobody survive without a shelter over their head? Without, you can survive with a whole lot of things, but you can't prosper without a place to lay your head and rest and rejuvenate and pray and feel safe and rest. Again, real rest, not looking over your shoulder, seeing if somebody's trying to break it, you lock in the shelter or hear that, or worrying about what you'll be able to put your head on your pillow to think that the next day through, the next move through, where you're not moving on impulse and reaction, but you have a plan because you got something over your head that you don't have to worry about. Food, clothing, and shelter. Clinicians talk about this all. Maslow's hierarchy and need. We got all these good things, but we don't provide them to people. And then when they mess up, we blame the people that mess up. We ain't provide Maslow's hierarchy, the first rung of the pyramid. And then when you can't get to the top, we blaming you. But we ain't provide you with nothing to help you get up those steps. Or we did something to keep you from getting up those steps, which also happens. So what we need community groups who are going to say, I'm not going to wait till you 60 days before you go home and start working with you. I'm going to start working with you when you got 6 years left or 5 years left, because I know you coming back to this community. You're not going to just get out in 5 years to automatically move to Tupelo, Mississippi, where you know nobody and you got nobody. You're going to move right back where you came from, or you're going to move where you have the supports and the assistance there. Why are we not having all this money that they giving this government giving out now? Why are we not making sure that, like somebody said, we got real affordable housing? Not housing that 25 to 30% of it is affordable housing. So you got 100 people in the building, all millionaires, and you got 50 people on welfare in there, and you spread them out in the building to hide them out, and that's affordable housing. No, that's not affordable housing. No, that's a game. And the game is being played against us. So we need affordable housing, real affordable housing. Why should a guy have to come home and pay supervision fees to a parole officer? He can't even pay rent. Why? Yeah, you got to pay a supervision fee, $30 every visit, or at least $30 a month. Some people come out, don't have $30, two rubber nickels to rub together. So now what you gonna do? So what we need is a real reentry system. The word reentry just came in this lexicon in the last 20 years. You know what they thought about before that? They didn't care. And only because people started coming out and saying, listen, I'm tired of failing and you ain't helping me, did they even think about reentry. They didn't think about, they didn't come to it. Let me tell you something. They didn't come to our aid like they did the hockey moms and the soccer dads who are on opiates now, where they provide them all this treatment and free places to get clean needles, and you get all of this help. And you, yeah, see, when my people was dying on 116th and 8th Avenue in Harlem, they was locking them up. While they was ODing, they put cuffs on them. But now they coddle these people because it's white and rich people now, suburbanites. Let's get the same service for the suburbanites. Then let's get that to the people in the poor section of town. Let's not make them have to jump through hoops and not be able to do things because they don't have no insurance. Let me tell you something. I did 30 years. Do you know what? Every year that I did, I had a zero balance on my Social Security. So now I come out, if I work 30 years, I'm still going to get only like $800 a month for the rest of my life to survive. And I'm a grown man with medical issues and everything else. How am I surviving for that? Where if they cared about me, they wouldn't zero my year out. They give me whatever the federal minimum wage for that year is and put that in the add up column so that when I go on disability or Social Security, I get a living wage. But they don't want me to have a living wage because I'm a black man who don't matter.
Jerome,
Before
thank
we
you
get
so
away
much.
from it, Jerome, I wanted to say that when you made that point about immunity for the police, they can be excused for killing a whole person, but we can come out of jail and can't even get a job. And we probably just, the crime doesn't even, equate that your whole life should be shut down. So they can get total pardon for killing a person, no trial, no nothing. And we can't even come out and get a job, be excused enough to be gainfully employed.
So we are at the sort of the end of our webinar, and this has been such a powerful, compelling dialogue and conversation with some very clear action steps moving forward. What I heard you say, Jerome, clearly, which provides, I would say, next steps or stepping stones, is a re-entry system that's humane. Okay, I heard you say that, a re-entry system that's humane, and that housing, of course, provides sanctuary for a person, spiritually, mentally, physically, sanctuary to be a human being. That should be a part of this re-entry system that you spoke about so vividly. So we have that work ahead of us. Foundational, we know in the recovery research, it's clear that housing is fundamental. But as Teresa pointed out, along with the housing, we need the emotional human connection to help with working through the trauma and making a life, making an enriched quality of life so that we all want to flourish, that people who have been, impacted traumatically through the inhumanity of the system can flourish like we all want to flourish in our lives and have voice and choice of what that means. So I just want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. I'm going to turn this back over to my co-facilitator, Luis, to wrap us up. And I think that we have our marching orders, our call to action moving forward clearly carved out and framed. And this webinar has helped us do that. Jerome, if you would put your contact information in the chat so people can reach out to you and get involved with HALT and other types of initiatives they can do that right now. And so Luis, it's all yours for wrapping us up.
Dr. Wilcox, thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank Jerome Wright and I want to thank Natasha White for their just powerful insight and just their amazing ability to be vulnerable during these conversations. I made a comment a couple of weeks ago when Jerome was presenting at another forum, and I was lucky enough to be the facilitator. And I was asking him, are you okay, brother? Can we continue? Because they put so much of themselves out there, but their goal goes beyond at this moment, even their personal safety, because they know they have a message they need to share. They talk about what's happening. They talk about what happened, but they also want people to understand the work is not done yet. This is the end of one chapter, right? And the beginning of another one. So I know Harvey, Jerome, Natasha will continue to work together. And we here at the Cultural Competency Committee look forward to be the platform to keep people up to date with the work that they're doing.
Okay, so
Locally, statewide, and nationally.
right. So we'd like to end us out, Luis, since our time has come.
Well, so thank you, everybody. You take care. You guys have been wonderful. Dr. Wilcox, thank you for providing just a phenomenal outline. Marguerite, you raised your hand. You have couple of last words before we go.
No. I was just saying goodbye
Okay,
and
all right.
thanking everyone.
So thank you, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Jerome, brother, stay safe.
Everybody have a blessed day and fight on.
Thank you. That's right. Keep fighting.
Ashe.
Keep fighting. Ashe. That's right.